Hey, what is going on, folks? We're here to check out essential lore you need to know before Space Marines 2, because I'm gearing up to start doing lives. And that's the game I want to start off with on this channel. I've already checked out the Space Hammer recap. I've checked out I already checked out the Space Hammer. Everything, God dang it. I'm actually fried. It's bad. I've checked out the Space Marine recap from GameSpot. Now I'm checking out their essential lore. I also am interested in major kills. I'm not gonna lie, just kind of wanted more of the facts first, and I still think I'm gonna check out major kills just because I like them anyways. So there's that. When I say facts, I mean like I didn't want to be confused, like seriously, and I wanted to make sure like what they're saying wasn't like a joke or a meme or something like that. So I'm checking out these homies, this homie right here, and that is that. I don't think I have to say anything else. But yeah, my brain is fried. It's terrible. If you guys have dope videos to recommend, use my pinned comment section to recommend things, and it makes it very easy and organized for me to find stuff. All right.
And both the universe and our titular character Titus have gone through their fair share of changes. We actually recapped the entire Space Marine 2 takes place nearly 200 years after the events of the original game, and both the universe and our titular character Titus have gone through their fair share of changes. We actually recapped the entire Space Marine 1 story in this video here if you wanted a recap of that game's plot. Whether you're going into Space Marine 2 fresh, you enjoyed the original, or even if you're a long-time 40k fan, I'm here to give you the absolutely essential lore and background that you need before going into Space Marine 2. The first piece of connective tissue between the two Space Marine titles is actually the 2023 shooter Warhammer 40,000 Bolt Gun. Bolt Gun takes place on Graia, the same planet from the original Space Marine, just several years after the events of the game. Playing as the Ultramarine Stern Guard veteran Malum Kado, you are sent to Graia by the Inquisition on a vital mission. The mission turns out to be the recovery of a fragment.
Yo, was that a real game? Those are real graphics? I mean, don't think I haven't played Super Nintendo. I'm just saying. I've never heard of Warhammer until literally last year. So to imagine how big the franchise is and how long they've been cooking games is just phenomenal to me. I'm mind blown. It's nothing bad. It's just like, wow, y'all really been here doing it for God knows how long. Anyways.
Of the very same power source from Space Marine 1, the device that ultimately led to the then Captain Titus being held captive and disappearing for nearly a century, but not before he shattered the artifact into fragments.
I will finish the work Captain Titus started!
In Bolt Gun, the remains of the power source is stolen by the Chaos Sorcerer Samael, who used it to open up a warp rift that threatened to engulf not only the planet, but the entire sector. Eventually, after Malum Kado defeats the Sorcerer, Inquisitor Sable arrives to retrieve the power source for the Inquisition, and in doing so seals the warp rift and scurries the device away. Now, time is a weird thing in Warhammer 40,000. The current 40k timeline is currently in a period known as the Era Indomitus, sometime within the 42nd millennium during the 4th Tyrannic War, which the now newly demoted Lieutenant Titus has been thrust into. There have been some enormous events that have come to pass in the 40k universe since the release of the original game, many of which have shaped the background and story of Space Marine 2, so let's go through some of the biggest. First, the fall of Cadia. Cadia was the Imperium's most important fortress world, serving as a bastion against Chaos forces.
What world?
The Imperium's most important fortress world, serving as a bastion against Chaos forces emerging from the Eye of Terror. Basically, the Eye of Terror is a big rift in reality that all the Chaos Space Marines and demons want to pour out of, and Cadia is what stood in the way. In the year 999 of the 41st millennium, Abaddon the Despoiler, the War Master of Chaos, launched a military campaign upon the galaxy, dubbed the 13th Black Crusade. This would become his most successful assault on the galaxy. Despite a huge number of forces on both the Chaos and Imperium side, Abaddon would emerge victorious through a desperate act which saw him launching an enormous star fort called a Blackstone Fortress into the planet. The massive kinetic force of such an impact caused the planet to be ripped apart and swallowed by the warp. Cadia is one of the most important planets in the 40k canon, and is important to Space Marine 2 as the Cadians will be making up most, if not all, of the human allies fighting against the Tyranid hordes in Space Marine 2. Despite their planet being reduced to chunks, Cadian forces can still be found across the galaxy, as the Cadian system produced huge numbers of troops before it fell. One of the smaller details that marks the in-game troopers as Cadian natives are their purple eyes. We first saw this detail back when Space Marine 2 was announced, as a member of the Astra Militarum looked upon their Astartes saviors with awe and reverence. Now let's talk about the return of the Ultramarines Primarch, Roboute Guilliman. For those of you who don't know, Primarchs are the genetically engineered sons of the Emperor of Mankind.
There he is!
To be his perfect, immortal, superhuman generals and leaders, second only to the Emperor himself. In the late 30th millennium, the Emperor of Mankind crafted 20 of these Primarchs and used their genetic template to craft 20 Space Marine legions. Roboute Guilliman is the Primarch of the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines. During the 30th millennium, the Horus Heresy tore the Imperium apart, throwing loyalists, traitor legions, and their Primarchs into a civil war. Roboute Guilliman and his Ultramarines, of course, sided with the loyalists. But Magnus the Red and his 1,000 sons turned traitor. These are the Chaos enemies that we'll be facing in the Space Marine 2 campaign. More on them later. During the aftermath of this, Guilliman was wounded by the traitor Primarch Fulgrim, his wounds being so severe that he was put into stasis, remaining in his wounded slumber for over 10,000 years, until he was finally resurrected after the fall of Cadia. Roboute Guilliman returned, not only as the Primarch of the Ultramarines, the chapter which Lieutenant Titus serves, but now also leads the Imperium as a whole as the current Lord Commander and Imperial Region. Space Marines have such an incredible reverence towards their Primarch, with many of them seeing them as not only their demigod leader, but also their father. So the possibility that we may see Astartes refer to Roboute Guilliman, or maybe even see him appear in the game, could lead to some extremely interesting developments. But let's stick to the need-to-knows for now. As you may expect from the grimdark far future, it's pretty easy for things to go from bad to worse. After the events of Cadia's fall and Roboute's revival, a gargantuan galaxy-spanning warp rift appeared, and essentially tore the galaxy in two, separating the halves with warp storms and tears in reality. This rift has also allowed further chaos incursions into the galaxy, stretching the Imperial forces rather thin. We will come back to why this is important later, but for now, let's shift our focus into the main boy in blue himself, Lieutenant Titus. Demetrian Titus is our returning Ultramarine protagonist. But where has he been in the years since the original Space Marine, and what's with his new outfit? I won't be recapping the story of the first Space Marine here. Again, you can check out this video if you want a refresher. But the finale of Space Marine saw Captain Titus getting reported to the Inquisition by the Ultramarine Leandros, and then arrested by Inquisitor Jerome Thrax under suspicion of potential heresy, as Titus had shown a resistance to the warp throughout the events of the game. But as we said earlier,
I'm sure there's a good reason for it. You know? And look, I understand that what they said. They said that because he's shown resistance, it's like inevitable that the warp is calling him, you know, and he will join chaos. So I get it. But it sucks because if he wasn't warp resistant, this whole mission fails. You know? And then they put him in chains or whatever, or in bondage. That's just BS. I understand it and I don't like it. Sometimes it's that simple.
That was nearly 200 years ago.
Shout out to my boy
Titus. So where has he been and what has he been up to? For a bit more context, we're going to look at issue 498 of the Warhammer magazine White Dwarf, which featured some more background lore for Captain Titus. Unfortunately for Titus, after the events on Graia, Inquisitor Thrax kept him in stasis for decades, only awakening him to run brutal tests and interrogations in a vain attempt to uncover some hidden corruption within the Space Marine. Ironically, Thrax would later fall to chaos and corruption himself, and would be slain by the Grey Knights after being possessed by a demon. This led to the Inquisition seizing Thrax's holdings and discovering Titus and many other captive Space Marines imprisoned in stasis. The Inquisitor who discovered these Astartes sent them to the Death Watch Fortress, Watcher Keep, for evaluation, where Titus would finally be deemed free of heresy. However, after being cut off from the Ultramarines for so long, Titus felt as though he had no chapter to return to, and believed that his story brought shame to the Ultramarines. So,
I feel validated. All it is we had some snitch who was just hating and a Boy Scout, and then the other dude who's susceptible to chaos himself just wanted to figure out Titus's power. You know what I mean? Like he's the corrupt one. It was the pot calling the kettle black. Except one of them was white. And the black one... I don't know where I was going with that. I'm just trying to say that my homie Titus ain't with the chaos like that, unless there's something I don't know. I think I remember him in Secret Level. That's
he would
the character,
instead join
right?
the Death Watch
Anyways.
as a Black Shield. The Death Watch are a unique chapter that works closely with the Inquisition and specializes in anti-Xenos warfare. They are some of the
Anti-Xenos
Imperium's
warfare.
most elite alien
I love
killers.
it.
Their numbers are also made up of Space Marines from other chapters who have joined the Death Watch to serve for a period of time, a
They're
great
like
honor for most Astartes.
They're like the Night Watch in Game of Thrones, right?
This is visually represented by the armor of the Space Marine being painted black, but their right pauldron retaining the colors of their original chapter.
Cool.
Another
That's
mark
cool.
of the
Seriously.
Death Watch is the shoulder plate and entire left arm is electroplated silver and polished to a high shine, with the shoulder plate bearing markings of the Inquisition. A Death Watch Black Shield, however, is an Astartes that has been severed from their own chapter, either through their own choice, exile, or potentially darker reasons. Titus's decision to become a Black Shield was basically a form of self-exile, as he took the black, so to speak, and in doing so he adopted the new name Nullus. Titus...
So back to my analogy. He ain't even black, man. He is just like, I'm just gonna be black, since that's how they want to trick me. Shout out to my boy Titus, man.
or Nullus, served in the Death Watch for
I
many
never-
years,
I like this
content
guy.
that he could continue to serve humanity by waging war against the galaxy's many Xenos threats. We are so far out of the realms of the original game's plot now, so if you don't want to hear any more about how Titus may reappear in Space Marine 2, or my theory crafting on the subject, this is your warning. Click away now or jump to this timestamp. During the Fourth Tyrannic War, Titus...
What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Give me a second. Let me understand what is happening here. Skip to this bit to avoid Dave's theories. I'm going to. Please respect my decision. Please. Because part of the joy in playing a game like that would be to be surprised. And he said it's his theories, so in my opinion, there's probably not any spoilers, but I'm just going to be safe than sorry. Please respect my decision, but y'all can always check out and see what he's talking about. I'm going to skip that part.
to this timestamp. During the Fourth Tyrannic War, Titus would find themselves reinforcing Kadaku, one of the planets that... Going back to the whole Primaris thing, if you played the original Space Marine but haven't kept up with the comings and goings of Warhammer 40,000, you may be out of the loop when it comes to this new flavour of Space Marine. Basically, a Primaris Marine is similar to the Marines you may have seen Titus fighting alongside back in 2011, but the next step in Astartes' evolution. Bigger,
Ooh.
stronger, and the new standard for Space Marines.
Ooh.
Over 10 millennia prior to the current timeline, Roboute Guilliman tasked Belisarius Cole, an Archmagus of the Mechanicum, with creating the next generation of warriors.
Wow.
Tens of thousands of Primaris Marines were created by Cole, and this new generation of space crusading super soldiers
Look at them.
continue to be cultivated by the majority of Space Marine chapters. The non-Primaris Marines, what Titus was in the original game, are now called Firstborn. But there is a
Firstborn.
process that allows a Firstborn Marine to be transformed into a Primaris Marine called the Rubicon Primaris. It is also known as the Calgarisian Rites in honor of the Ultramarines chapter master Marnius Calgar, who underwent
Cool.
the operation himself. But it is this procedure that is responsible for Lieutenant Titus's new form and stature. The eagle-eyed among you may have also noticed a lot of the weapons have also changed in the years between games. New Marines need a new kit, so Primaris also have their own equipment and weapons, more suited to this new generation of Astartes. Weapons which will make up the majority of the usable war gear in Space Marine 2. For example, instead of the standard bolt gun from previous 40k games, the standard issue bolt weapon of the Primaris is the larger bolt rifle. There is also
Bolt
a new
rifle.
standard version of Space Marine power armor, the Mark 10 Tacticus armor, which you can see Titus and the rest of the Ultramarines wearing throughout the trailers. There are also some other armor variants like the heavily armored Gravis pattern or the lightweight Phobos pattern. But all of that is to say, there are going to be a lot of new guns, gadgets, and suits of armor to hunt Xenos and Heretics with in Space
I
Marine
like
2.
it.
Now we get to the filthy Xenos and Heretic enemies of Space Marine 2, the Tyranids and the Thousand Suns. The Tyranids, also known as the Great Devourer, is a giant spacefaring insectoid-like alien race driven by a hive mind, whose sole purpose is to consume all organic material across the galaxy. And boy, do they look
That's
hungry.
a cool form.
From
I'm
their
not gonna
ships
lie.
to their weaponry, they are entirely biological, and all linked together into the larger hive mind, or as part of a hive fleet. The Hive
Jeez.
Fleet we'll be getting up close and personal with in Space
Jeez.
Marine 2 is Hive Fleet Leviathan, the strain of xenos responsible
Leviathan.
for the Fourth Tyrannic War we mentioned earlier. And a foe, Titus now has much more experience fighting from his stint in the Death Watch. Tyranids also come in all shapes and sizes, such as the smaller Hormagaunts and Termagaunts who make up the dense waves of the creatures, as well as the larger forms like warriors. These larger forms are also synaptic creatures, which means they are able to direct smaller Tyranids, while also acting as a link to the larger hive mind, and killing one of these creatures can disrupt that link. On the side of Chaos this time round, however, are the forces of the Thousand Suns. The Thousand Suns were one of the original Space Marine legions, but turned traitor during the Horus Heresy, with the legion and their primarch Magnus the Red eventually dedicating themselves to the chaos god of change and sorcery, Tzeentch. One of the main features of the Thousand Suns is their use of warp magic, with most members of the legion having sorceress abilities and their war gear being touched by the warp. The other main feature is that long ago, the vast majority of the Thousand Suns Marines were turned to dust and entombed within their warp-infused armor. This was due to a spell cast by the Thousand Suns chief librarian Azek Araman. The intention was to rid the Thousand Suns of mutation, but instead, the less psychically sensitive Marines were cursed and became the mindless Rubricae, meaning there will be plenty of spell slinging and demon summoning when we come to face off against the other Boys in Blue. This not only makes them a unique enemy, but could lead to some interesting moments across Space Marine 2, since as we discussed earlier, our main protagonist Titus has some uncanny resistance to the ruinous powers. But how exactly these elements will clash, we'll just have to wait and see. And with that, I think I've covered all of the essential lore for anyone returning to Warhammer 40,000 after playing the original, or for folks new to the franchise. We're going to have plenty of Warhammer content in the lead up to Space Marine 2, as well as more to come after the game launches. So subscribe so you don't miss that, like the video if you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.
Sounds cool. That was dope. I think I know what I need to know. That's just it. I don't have too much to add other than what I, paused the video for. So, hey, folks, thank you for, vibing with me on this one. We're gearing up for a live content on this channel. And my plan is to begin with Space Marine 2. So, until the next video, guys, subscribe if you haven't. Get ready for it. I'm out.